Well, hey everyone, we made it to Philippians chapter 2. Quick moment to reflect on chapter 1. Paul's writing from prison in Rome to this church in Philippi. And Paul, even though he is in prison, is joyful because his focus is on Christ, the gospel, and others. He's talking about the Christian life, and he is encouraging the church in how to live. For the Christian, to live is Christ. Christ must be everything. So let's go ahead and read Philippians 2, 1 through 5, our text for today, with that in mind.
So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy,
complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind.
Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves.
Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus.
Whenever we read, we notice and we question specific things so that we can have a better idea of what the text says. And we follow a process. And the first thing that we do is we take a black pen and we underline repeated words in black. Now here's some things that I noticed. The word any is repeated a lot in verse 1, 4 times in fact. Of course, Christ is there a lot. We always draw attention to him in verses 1 and 5. Joy is repeated once in this text, but we've established previously that joy is a theme of the book, and so we're going to underline it here. The word mind is repeated a couple times in verse 2 and in verse 5. Plus, it was also referred to in our last passage, so I underlined that. The word others is underlined here in verse 3 and 4. And then interest is twice in verse 4. So we see those as being our focus words. Then we would look at statements about God, and we would circle those, and I circled 3. Encouragement in Christ, participation in the Spirit, and then yours in Christ Jesus in verse 5. Definitely 3 things, 3 ideas that we want to look into a little bit more. And then last in black, we're going to box transition words. And there are a few we could look at. Let's look at these, though. The very opening word, so, for this passage, even looking at it as a so if, as a connecting word. And then the 2 buts in verses 3 and 4. They offer a distinction between the contrasting ideas that happen in those 2 verses that we'll talk about later. After we're done using our black pen for that, we can go to blue. We can underline any unfamiliar words. I underlined the word accord. It seems there are more confusing phrases in this passage than there are words. But if you're seeking out a better definition for some of these words, that's great. Take the time, look them up, get that definition so that it will deepen your understanding. Then we number any lists, and there are some here. That opening verse says, any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, and then there's the phrase, complete my joy, and a new list starts. Being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord, and of one mind. We could probably make and of one mind a 4th thing. We'll talk about that in the next video. Then we would box any confusing ideas. And you know what? I boxed everything from the list that I just read, both those lists, because to understand this passage, we need to know what these phrases mean. What are they about? How do we understand, or how are we supposed to understand any of those things? And then once you've done that, once you've made those observations, once you've noticed, put it all down. Write out those focus words. Write out the lists. Write out the statements about God. See them as a whole. Ask questions that come from what you've just read. My main questions from this text are centered around those same phrases that we put in the list that Paul has written here. What do those phrases individually mean? Now, I look forward to getting to talk about that more in our next video. Use your resources to see what you come up with. Thanks for watching.